going to do is start with a couple of songs, and then I will start my part here. And this is Hannah and Samuel and Lily Schaefer, and they are going to play 2 songs for us now. Thank you. First of all, let me step out of character and tell you these are my grandchildren, and I'm enormously proud of them. And I didn't mean to scare you with
Yes.
Okay. Hard to hear?
Yes.
Okay, let me add some volume to my voice here and tell you I am Lettice Jane Millican Clark Reynolds. That's the part that I am playing today. And so I will walk through this with you, and then we will hear some more from the grandchildren as they play some more songs later. Okay? Okay. Let me start again by telling you my name was Lettice Millican. Lettice Jane Millican, and I was born the oldest of 9 children that came west on the 1843 wagon train, the largest train that came west looking for new land, looking for religious freedom, looking for opportunity to build and be able to live our lives in the wonderful land of freedom, the Oregon territory that we had heard about. My parents, Elijah and Lucinda Millican, were from Arkansas, and they had been talking about going west and looking for new land. And so we began looking for opportunity to move west. And the mode of transportation at that time was a typical wagon train like you see back here. The wagon is approximately 3.5 feet wide by 10 feet long. And our family, because there were so many kids, we had 2 wagons. And so my father, he built the wagons, and we started selling our possessions, getting rid of things we didn't need or want, and getting ready to go west. And of course, there were 9 of us children. Me being the oldest, I was 13 years old. And I don't know if we have any 13-year-olds here, but that's how old I was when we came west. So I was as tall as I am now, and I was able to do a lot of work and responsibility because I was so old. And so I was able to help my mother an awful lot. And so we started out in 1843 in our 2 wagons with the Applegate brothers as leaders. And we also had a very famous person in our group, that was Dr. Whitman. He had gone east to find permission to keep this Whitman mission over here in Waiilatpu going, because they were going to close it. Kind of infighting and so forth. They weren't getting along real well. And so the government had decided that they were going to close it. But he went back and appealed, and so that's why he was back there. He had met with the president, and they decided to let it stay open. So he was coming back to Waiilatpu, and he joined our wagon train of 1,000 people. And so we actually then had a doctor on board. He was going to be our doctor as well as our guide, because he'd been here, so he knew. He knew the route and everything. And so anyway, he went with us and helped us with medical things, medical situations and everything. And it wasn't all that easy traveling because it was unexplored. It was basically unexplored with no roads and no real maps. Now, unbeknownst to us, which we found out later, there was a group, Fremont was commissioned to map it out and to present it in a way that we would get more people to come west and explore, and to write up a description in a way that would bring more people in, because what our goal was to retain the Oregon Territory for the United States, and so it wouldn't end up with Britain or whatever. Anyway, we knew that time was of the essence. We had to get people here to settle it and make it secure. So Fremont at the same time was traveling and drawing his maps and everything. And there was a member of his group that was commissioned, and his name was Ransom Clark. And he was one of the employees or commissioned people to travel with Fremont and draw these maps. And so we were all traveling at the same time, and at one point where there was a soda springs, our groups intersected, and he was there with his group, and but we didn't pay much attention to them because it was just another group of people, we thought. So we're traveling west, and we get to Whitman Mission. Well, just before that, Marcus Whitman left us and traveled on to Waiilatpu to be there and to take care of some problems that he was having with the Indians. And so he was he was able to leave us in the able care of Stickus. I think that's how you say his name, the Indian guide. He had he got us on into Waiilatpu, and we were there to rest a little bit while we were able to build some flatboats to take our wagons on down the river. And while we were here at Whitman Mission, we were able to meet Narcissa Whitman, who I remember even as a 13-year-old as a lovely lady, beautiful, and so congenial and so kind to us. And so then we went on to our destination, which was the Yamhill country. And oh, by the way, if anybody wants a handout, I've got some handouts here of that you can follow along if you're interested in that. And if you'd like, Lily, would you like to hand a few out if anybody's interested? They're the same handout that I've given to you through the years, but the facts are still there. Nothing's changed. So you can go ahead and hand those out too. Yeah, they're all stapled, yeah. So thank you. Anyway, so we went on to, it's the Portland area. Yamhill is in the Portland area. So anyway, that's where we ended up. And we were able to prepare some land and to homestead this area. Well, remember, I'm 13 years old, so I'm not a young person anymore, really. At the time, you know, if you were 15 or older, well, actually, if you were 17 and you weren't married, you would be considered an old maid. So I was getting up there. And so anyway, when we got to the Portland area and to Yamhill, then we settled there, the same place that Ransom Clark settled. And so let me show you a picture of him. It's not a very big picture, but you're welcome to pass this around. And it's not a very big picture, but it is about the only picture I have of him. Anyway, he settled in that area, and I got acquainted with him. And 2 years later, we got married. So 15, I made it so I wasn't an old maid anymore. Anyway, and we got right into the busy work of planting crops and growing crops, as well as raising animals and then selling them. So we had a little market for our supplies and everything. And that was in Portland area, Yamhill area. And so we were able to make a good living doing that. And a year later, my son Charles was born. And so Charles was a twin, and he was born a year after our marriage, and the twin did not survive. So we named him Charles, and we lost our first child in the twin. And so then you've probably heard of the itching foot, where if people wanted to go to the gold fields and look for gold and get rich, off he went to the first gold fields that he heard about, and he didn't do so well. He didn't make any money at it, so he came back. And then and we had another child that we had. Harry was the child that was born next. Thank you, Lily. And then off again, he was off to the gold fields again. And while he was gone to these gold fields, my son Harry, who was 4 years old, he passed away, and he died of one of the diseases that comes through and gets our children, and so we lost our second child. And then on Ransom's way back from the gold fields, he stopped in Walla area again, because he had come through just like the rest of us and the first time, and he was very impressed with the beauty of the land and the possibilities, because it looked like good area for growing crops and so forth, and so not very big picture, is it? Did you all get it on this side? Did it go all the way around? Okay. So, by the way, Ransom Clark was 30 years older than I was, and so there was an age difference, but we were very happy, except that he didn't do very well with the gold fields, and I wanted him home because we had decided to start working at a hotel there in Portland area, and I could really use his help, and so I needed him with me instead of off looking for gold. And so while he was gone, like I was saying, Harry didn't live past 4 years old, and so while he was returning, he looked the land over again, and he decided he would pick out what was considered a donation claim, where you could work the land and so forth, but you had to apply for it first. And so he mapped it out, and then he planned on claiming it as a donation claim. While he was looking it over and deciding where to get the lumber and so forth, some Indian trouble started up, and they said all white people had to leave the area. And so they went, the authorities came and told him that they all had to leave, all the white people had to leave the Walla area. And when they found him, then he left to go back to Portland where I was, but then he filed on it while he was able to file on it, but he couldn't start proving it up, because you had to maintain that land in order to prove it up. You had to live on it, you had to raise your crops, build your house, you had to literally occupy it if you were going to get to keep it. But with the Indian trouble and the fact that they had said you have to leave it, then they honored that paperwork and that claim that he wrote up. So in 1855, when he had to leave it and go home, then that was put on hold, so he didn't lose anything. While he was home with me, then we continued to work with this hotel, and of course I had to do all the laundry, I had to feed the guests, I had to do all the work, but he had a partner, and that partner wasn't totally honest, so it was not a good arrangement that he had. Okay, so while in 1858, then the Indian trouble ceased, and they had decided it was okay for people to come back in and occupy the land. So in 1859, at the beginning, then he came back to the area. But before he did, he gathered up the supplies that he would need. And so, let's see, he gathered up several boxes of apple and peach starts for trees. He gathered up all the tools that he would need, He had things that he would need for building a cabin, and so he was able to get everything together, and then the beginning of 1859 he came back over here, and he started proving up this land, which was still held for him because he had filed his claim. And so then he came back home, he got our son Charles, and came back over and worked on a cabin, and started the cabin. I don't know how many of you have been down to the village and seen the Ransom Clark cabin. Okay, some of you have, and I hope you all will get down there and see it, because that is the cabin he started building. And that's the actual cabin that he was building as a home for us. And it's got a unique style, so I'm very pleased with this cabin. Anyway, he came back to help me. This is still in 1859. A lot is happening in 1859. So he came back to get me and our son William, and to bring us back to the cabin that he's building and having built, and left Charles here and came back to get me. Unfortunately, he became ill, and he didn't make it. He died. And so there I am. I haven't seen the land. I haven't seen where he is, but I've heard all about how wonderful it is, and I'm looking forward to it and everything. But Charles is over here. He doesn't even know his dad has died. And so I decide I need to go and look at the land. Now, Judge Shattuck, who was a prominent person in my area, said, you need to just give it up and sell it. Here's somebody that will give you $250 for it, and you can just write it off and you can go home to mother, and you can get some help with your children. And one thing I didn't mention is I was 7, 8 months pregnant, and I was now a widow. And so I could have really used my mother and father's help with the children, but I thought, he has really, really believed in this. I really should at least go and look at it. I should, and I certainly need to let Charles know. So I decided, well, I've got enough time to get over there and check it out before my baby is born, and I'm going to go. And so I traveled over from Portland area to Walla, and I came to see what this was all about. And of course I met Charles, and I got a chance to tell him the sad news that he had lost his father. But and then I saw what they were building. And not only was I impressed with the house, the Ransom Clark cabin that they had were building, but I was impressed with the land. There's all these waterways through there. There was just really a good opportunity for a livelihood and a place to raise my family. But the interesting thing is, I'm a woman, and no woman has ever done a claim before, a donation claim. It was not done. So I decided I'm going to hang on to this and do this. With Charles's help, with my children, we can do this. And so I went back to Portland, had my baby, and settled my affairs with the hotel. And I didn't get any money out of it because this dishonest partner kept everything, and I settled it and took what little I had, and now I don't know if you've heard of Abbott. You see the stagecoach here. That was the first stagecoach in this area, and he was just coming to this area, Walla Walla, to start the business, and he was going to run from Wallula to Walla Walla and to Lewiston, and his plan was, anyway, to run the stage for a business. And remember, Walla Walla didn't have much going on at that time. It was just a very small community. And so I rode on his first passenger, my children and I, well, my littlest, my new baby, and William. And we rode to Walla Walla in the stagecoach. And I moved into a completely finished house, the Ransom Clark cabin, as you see it, and that was my home. Well, times were hard, and we had a lot of work to do. I had farming to do. As you can see, we had a lot of, see if I can not knock this over. We had a lot of work to do. Here we go. I was making butter to sell as well as for the family. I was growing crops. There was so many things. Look at the size of that. Just picked it out of my garden this morning. But this is just growing crops and milking cows, all kinds of things that I could do to make a go of working the land. But the problem was I didn't have any way to make money. So all these things I could do. I could make a garden grow, I could milk the cows, I could do things like that, but it wouldn't bring in any cash. So at the time, there was a man that moved to the area to be a millwright, and his name was Reynolds. And he was going to build a flour mill right next to us. Well, this was providential because he's grinding the wheat for flour, and he needed bags, sacks for the grain. And I could I could sow these, and I could make a little money. And so I went to sewing flour sacks, and that gave me the money I needed to pay the bills that I couldn't just work and grow. So that was how I managed to survive. And with the hard work of myself and my children, we were able to make it. Now, this man, very respectable man, and I was a very, very respectable woman, and I was working hard, and we noticed each other. And so a couple of years later, we got married. And we got married in that Ransom Clark cabin, and it was a double wedding because my sister and her husband were the other ones that married in that little cabin there. And so anyway, we lived in that cabin for a while, and then we decided we needed more room. And so we built, my husband, he commissioned a building of a house near the Ransom Clark cabin, and so we were able to get into a larger house. Well, he was not just a builder of one, he built several mills. And so he also then got into the banking business, and he was quite successful at business. And so then we just kept moving up and, earning more money. And so then we had two sons. And one was Alan, and one was Harry. So I actually had two sons named Harry in my lifetime. Okay, so anyway, he again, I married an older man, so he was even older than the age difference of Ransom Clark. And so he died at 81. And at that point, then I was a widow again. And so then I moved again to the area where the post office is now. Do you know where on South was 2nd or something like that? Anyway, we had a house there, which is no longer there, and now the post office is there. So, again, I spent many years as a widow, but I also was very frugal. And so there were some projects that I was able to get involved with. And I don't know if you recognize this building or not. I understand it is still there. It is the YMCA. We wanted to do something for the betterment of children in the area. We always felt strongly that we needed to have more education and more guidance for our young people. And so we decided to put some money into building this. And so I came up with $20,000 for this building, which was a very sizable amount of money at that time. So I was able to help make that happen. And then there was another building that I was able to help with. Then I understand this building is not here anymore on Whitman campus. The Reynolds Hall, which was the women's facility, where they lived, the dormitory, and I understand that's not there anymore. But there is a plaque on Whitman campus that shows what used to be there, and I gave $6,000 towards that, and so I was able to finish or close the debt on that one. And so there were a lot of things I got involved with. And I even saw myself in the newspaper recently. And this is your local paper where it's talking about your fair. You have a fair that comes to town. Is it once a year, or is it, and I'm looking here, the author is Susan Monahan. I don't know who that is. Let's see. But she's writing about the things that were submitted to the fair, and it said that that you could get $2 for the best 2 pounds of butter, or $3 for the best 2 pounds of butter for a girl under 14. It was made. And some fancy crochet, just all kinds of fun things like that. Well, I was not to be outdone, because it says here that Lettice Clark Reynolds cheese scored a premium, which would be a pretty high honor. So I brought you some of my cheese, and afterwards you can help me sample this and see what you think, okay? So anyway, the wheat was the new gold of this area, and so as you can see, instead of gold, we weren't so successful with finding gold in our area, but we had wheat, and that accounts for a lot of our wealth as a family. So anyway, I would like to hear some more music, but I also think you might like to see some of the tools that we use to build our cabin. You know what this is? The peel the bark. Let's see, it is, see, I'm getting old, and so I have to look at my notes. It is a draw knife. You know how it's used? I bet you do. And then this, so you can look at some of these things afterwards. And I have pictures of myself here, the different periods of time. And I'm going to sit down and let the grandkids play some more music. Anybody have any questions about my character or our musicians?
Were you around when?
How old was she when she died? When did she die?
Ooh, I'll have to step out of character. She died of old age. She was 81, and that was in 1911.
Were you around when the Whitmans were massacred?
I was, but I was in Portland area, yeah.
Did they burn anything around here or do anything?
I wasn't here. I was over in Portland, so,
If they burned any stuff down around town here?
I don't know about around town here. I don't know. Yeah. We'll have to ask about that, I guess. Maybe Susan Monahan them.
Well, there wasn't really a town to burn.
No, not at that time. Not at that time.
Did they burn the mission?
Yes, they did that.
They burned the mission?
Yeah. But that was out of town. Yeah. Yes.
Well, it looks like they started the grist mill about 11 years before they were growing wheat here. Where were they getting wheat from?
Well, there were smaller farms. quantity would not be as much. But that's an interesting thing, because the equipment that they were coming up with it would allow them to to plant on the side hills as they got better at this. Now, that is really, timing-wise, yeah, I hear what your question is, and I don't know exactly how much wheat they were able to do, to bring in, but it would be smaller. Yeah. Oh, it really, when we got the better equipment, that really increased the amount of wheat that we were able to grow. But timing-wise, yeah, I don't know where they brought in the wheat from, except for what we were able to grow right here.
And you know, I've read the date 1864 for the start of the dry land wheat farming. So maybe that would explain it was really going more by the time of mill.
Yeah, it was definitely needed, but yeah, there were a lot of new things happening and everything right at that time, yeah.
They were, needed reapers. I don't know where they were coming from, but up in Chicago. Probably put together pieces of them.
I know the equipment to do these pieces of equipment were adapted here for the side hills. So that improved things a lot when they were able to grow wheat on the side hills and cut it. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you. Try my cheese.